Today we are moving into PHP. So we're moving into the web scripting portion of the course. We're going to spend 2 weeks on PHP and 2 weeks on JavaScript. PHP is scripting for the server side of a web application, and JavaScript is scripting for the client side. So the idea, I have a horrible ability to draw, but here we have a user sitting with a browser, and you have some web page that's up. So we'll pretend it's Kayak. So the user is typing in information into Kayak, such as if you don't know what Kayak is a site that allows you to find cheap flights or the best flight available between two cities. So Kayak is collecting what's called form information that is got stuff like which cities you're flying to, what the dates are, any restrictions you might have, such as nonstop or one leg or two legs. So that information then gets transmitted to a server that is running at some site, and that server is running a script which happens to, in our case, it's going to be PHP. It can be Python, it can be Perl, it can be Ruby, it can be a number of other scripting languages. And that script will perform some kind of computation. In this case, there is a database that is sitting off here that has information about flights. So the PHP script will query the database, get some information back about flights, format that into a web page, and send the web page back to the client. And the client will display that information. Now, the form information is typically collected by a script on the client side, and there's a number of languages frequently used. The two most common are JavaScript and Visual Basic, and we'll be talking about JavaScript because it's the more widely used. But JavaScript is able to do various manipulations on the browser or to the page that's on the browser, and it takes that information and displays it. It can also sometimes perform manipulations on it. So for the next 2 weeks, we'll be talking about what goes on the server side. So today, we'll talk about just the language syntax of PHP and kind of what makes it amenable to server-side scripting, why it became so popular for server-side scripting. Then Thursday, we will talk about forms, because a lot of you probably have not had actual experience creating forms using HTML. Then a week from today, we'll talk about how PHP processes form data. And then the final Thursday that we talk about PHP, we'll be talking about how PHP accesses a database in order to do its processing. But this is the basic interaction that goes on between a client and a server. Okay, so it's two different scripts, one running on the client in the browser, one running on the server, and the interactions are discrete, which means that when you can have multiple instances of form data being sent to the server. Each time that happens, a different PHP script is invoked. So you don't have this notion of a program sitting on the server exclusively devoted to something on the browser. It's not that at all. The script runs once, it exits, sending its output back to the user, and then when the user does some more manipulations and sends form data back, even if the same script starts up, it's a new instance of that script. All local variables and their state data have been lost. Now, PHP has a way to hold data across multiple, it's called session data, so that two different scripts can access the same data, and we'll talk about that. But you should also know that it's not even necessary for the same server to handle two requests from the same browser session. A large company like Amazon may well have different servers access or handling data from the same user over time. So it's not even the case that the same server has to deal with the user's browser session. Okay, now on the user side, every time a new page comes in, a completely new page, that also creates a completely new script, JavaScript session on the user side, and any local variables that were part of the original JavaScript are lost. So web programming is much different than the kind of programming you're used to. You're used to writing long-running programs that are able to build up state information and keep that state information over long periods of time. Web programming is not like that. Web programming is one-off programs that run once, exit, and then if another request comes in, those scripts are starting up from scratch. And that can make web programming very annoying because the inability to keep that, what we call session information, between different invocations of a script complicates life considerably. Okay, I do a lot of web programming now in my research, and I find that to be the single most annoying part of web programming is its inability to keep state information, okay, or easily keep state information. Annika. Mm-hmm. Actually, that's a good question. I'm not really sure how the underlying thing is coming in, but I would say it is probably like threads in that they're connecting on a socket. There's got to be a thread listening for the connection and probably firing up PHP things. I know this is where I'm weak. There's something called the Common Gateway Interface. CGI, and that kind of controls the way that data is transmitted back and forth, and it probably is what the threads are working off of, that interface, but I'm not really, I guess, knowledgeable about what we'd call the plumbing of it, how it's the infrastructure. I know once the scripts have been started how they operate, but the way in which those scripts get going, I'm not. But you're probably right. They're probably listening on a socket. They're probably firing up the appropriate script as they get that socket. And each script is probably starting on its own separate thread, would be my guess. It makes sense to me that that would work. Mm-hmm. Other questions? Okay, so let's see, the easiest thing to do might be to show you a quick example of what I'm talking about. So I have a pizza example. Is this one going to work? Nope. Okay, that didn't work either. Okay, I think it's pizza.html. There we go. So I have an initial page that I display on the server side. So it has this form. Pick your toppings, pick pepperoni and mushrooms. Okay, ask me my favorite color, I'll say purple. Show top 10. And then I click send form. So that's going to send form data to the server. And you can see there's a URL here that may be somewhat hard for you to read from the back. Can you read that in the back or not? Not too easily. Okay, let me copy that and see if I can't dump it into the notebook. There we go. So, let's see if I can't make that a little bit smaller. Nope. Okay, well, you get the gist of it. So what you can see here is it's a URL, except that instead of it being to a HTML page, it's actually to a script. Now this is pizza.cgi, I believe, is a Perl script, not a PHP script. If it was a PHP script, it would have the suffix .php. But this is telling it to execute this script on the server. And the server machine is web.eecs.utk.edu. So on that machine, or whatever machine that web address gets mapped to, there is in the BVZ web home CGI bin directory, there is a script called pizza.cgi that starts executing, and it gets, after the question mark, it gets this information. So they're keyword value pairs. So top is for topping, pepperoni, top equal mushroom. So obviously this is a keyword with multiple values. Favorite color, you can't see that, but whoops. Favorite color equals purple, number equals 10. So that information gets transmitted to the server. On the server, this is uniform pretty much. That gets translated into a hash table. So you'd have toppings, and this would be an array with pepperoni and mushroom. You have favorite color, which is purple. You have number, which is 10. So this is a hash table that your script would give you access to. And it would be predefined. And then you could pull this. This is all form data that's been converted into this form right here. It's sent over to the server. The server converts it to the hash table, calls your script, and now you can access the form data. The CGI interface that I'm talking about is this kind of action right here that's going on, defining the way that information gets sent from the client to the server. Okay, so now on the server side, it would generate a web page to come back, and I did not hit the right script, so I'm going to look to see what the script is. So the first thing you'll notice is I am changing to, actually I'm changing to WW home. Depending on, see, some of your machines it will be web, on others it will be, I think, web home. Is that it? Yes. So you need to put your scripts in a directory called web home. That is where our server looks for your scripts. So then in web home I have a directory called CGI bin, and it has the whole set of scripts in it. The question is, which one is calling pizza? There it is, pizza php.html. Okay. Okay, so this one, same thing, except this one is going to be calling a PHP script. Okay, you can see it called pizza.php, it said you asked for the following pizza toppings: pepperoni, mushrooms, favorite color purple, number equals 10. Now if we look at what that pizza.php script is, here it is. And this is what makes PHP special. This is the secret sauce that made PHP the language of choice for server-side scripting. PHP allows you to create dynamic web pages. So what you see there, that looks like a HTML page. Now I know many of you may not have seen HTML markup before, but a web page consists of what we call markup language. So this HTML says it's an HTML page. Body indicates a body. P is paragraph. OL is ordered list. B says to boldface something. And then you end tags with the forward backslash. Also, you'll notice these horizontal lines. Those are created with the HR tag. So these tags are meaningful to a browser. A browser knows what to do with the tags. When it sees content enclosed in a B tag, it boldfaces it. So over here, you see that favorite color is bold-faced. Okay? When it says to create an ordered list, that creates a list where the items are numbered. Now you'll see that most of this is just static text. No matter what happens, it will display you asked for the following pizza toppings. No matter what, it will display this horizontal rule and favorite color. No matter what, it will print out number equals. So that's all what is called static content. But there's dynamic content we want as well. Depending on what toppings the user entered, we want to echo back those toppings. So that's not dynamic, or I'm sorry, that's not static content, that's dynamic. What PHP allows you to do is embed what are called PHP code islands into the thing. So these things are called PHP code islands. And they execute, and their output is what appears in the HTML page that is sent to the browser. So in this case, it is iterating through the hash table $_request. Remember I said that the form data is loaded into a hash table. That hash table's name in PHP is $_request. So we're getting the toppings out, and we're printing. LI is the markup language for line item. So we're printing out the topping. And then down with favorite color, you see another PHP code island. And there we're echoing out the color. And you'll see here I used request, here I used get. It turns out either hash table works. Request gathers up information from several different hash tables. So they're one and the same. And here again is my third PHP code island where it's echoing out the number that I entered. Okay? So what happens, I can't actually execute this one because the request from the command line, but I can create my own one. So I'll create foo.php, and I don't need this. So I will echo out boldface, and I'll say $A equals 10, $B equals 20, print $A plus $B. So there I'm outputting a very simple HTML page that's going to have something in boldface. Now I can run it at the command line, and you can see it outputs This is the output, and this is the output that would be sent back to the browser and what the browser would display. Okay, so PHP is really neat because it allows you to generate dynamic web pages, which is really important for a lot of sites. If I'm generating a receipt or an acknowledgement, I want to personalize that content. I don't want to just ship back a static web page. So that's why PHP became popular so rapidly. It was introduced in 1994. It originally stood for personal homepage because the person who developed it just wanted to be able to display dynamic content on his web page. But it became popular and it's evolved. I think it now stands for something hypertext processor.
PHP.
Oh, PHP hypertext processor. Okay. So at any rate, the original thing though stood for personal homepage, and that's why it's named PHP. Preprocessor. Okay. Hypertext preprocessor. So that is the cool thing, is you essentially set up what looks like an HTML page, but you put PHP code islands into the middle of it, and whatever gets printed out in those PHP code islands is what also appears in that document that gets sent back to the browser. And as you can see, a PHP code island starts with a less than question mark, then the words PHP, and it ends with a question mark greater than sign. So that denotes the beginning and end of a PHP code island. It is the case that within a single file, that something you define in one code island stays defined in subsequent ones. So I could now print out, let's say H1, Brad, how are you? And I could then echo back after that, PHP. I could print $A and print a paragraph thingy, and then print $B. And it would print out 10 and 20 because it will remember the values of A and B. So if I run this, you can see 10, P, 20 right there. Okay, so local variables defined in one code block or one code island are still defined in a subsequent code island. So that's nice. But you can also see I execute the script, it's done. It generated the web page, it sent it back, that's it. Now $A and $B are no longer defined. Okay? You can see why this could be a problem, because while here I've simply printed out the pizza toppings, think about what a real pizza thing would do. First of all, it would probably allow me to pick my toppings, then it might confirm it, right, to make sure that I'm happy with my order. Then I'd probably have another button here where I'd say proceed to checkout. Well, when I proceed to checkout, I want to know what those toppings are. So ideally, I really would have liked to have a program that was permanently attached to this session on the client side, and that was keeping track of the fact that the user wants pepperoni and mushrooms. But because the original script terminated, I'm going to have to somehow find a way to store this information about pepperoni and mushrooms and send that information to the next PHP script that boots up. Now, we won't worry about that today. We'll worry about that next week. But I'm just telling you what some of the problems are with web programming. Yes, Donica?
So when you you fill out a form, click enter, and then on the next page, maybe you refresh or something like that, and asks you to re-enter the form. Is
Is doing what? Patching?
Yeah, something kind of like.
Yes, well, so PHP has what's called session management, where it is actually kind of keeping your session information either in temporary memory or in a database. And so it's actually able to keep what's called a session ID, and it can identify your session to a session ID. So when the next script boots up, what happens is it looks at the session ID, sees what information is associated with the session ID, and makes that available to the next script. Okay, so, but it is doing some work for you on your behalf. Okay, so that's essentially what's going on. It's what makes PHP cool. And browsers naturally recognize it. So basically, you can just type in a URL like this and execute pizza.php directly from the URL. So I could actually change it here. Instead of purple, I could change it to orange and number to 20. And without even going through the web page, I was able to change what appeared on the output page. This is one way that hackers get around web pages. So hackers know how to also type in URLs, and you can think that the user is going through your web page, but if you're not, that's why you typically have to treat all information that you get on the server as suspect, because you can't be sure that the user went through a web page to send you that data. You can type check all that information on a web page, but then here as a hacker, I'm just bypassing it and entering my own information that's not been type checked by the web page. So I could do all kinds of malicious stuff. Just imagine that the web page said that the cost was, let's say, $15.20. I don't feel like paying $15.20. I feel more like $1.20. Okay? Well, you'd be going out of business pretty fast if you relied on the data that you were getting from the URL as the final word on the matter. So on the back end, you really have to treat all form data that you get as suspect. Okay, and again, we will talk about that, but I'm showing you one very simple way that you can circumvent web pages by knowing about URLs and how they operate. Okay, so you can actually call scripts on a computer with the URL. It's also why lab staff gets so jazzed about the fact that I let you put scripts on the computers, because this is essentially, if you do it wrong, hackers can essentially get access to our machines and our servers, and that understandably makes lab staff very jittery. Fortunately, PHP is pretty safe. It's Perl that's super dangerous. So PHP, you can set options in PHP, and lab staff does, that prevents certain things from happening. So for example, in the notes, you'll see that I go through a discussion about how you can upload a file using PHP. Well, the lab staff has disabled uploading files, so that's all well and good. You can write a script to upload a file, but it won't work because the lab staff just set properties in our PHP installation that stops files from being uploaded. Perl's not like that. Perl, you can't stop that behavior. And so Perl scripts are much more dangerous, and those are the ones that I get pushback from lab staff on, because Perl, remember, gives you access to system commands. So if you put calls to system commands in your Perl script, well, a hacker can do all kinds of nasty stuff to subvert that, and then they might be able to get access to the underlying system. So Perl scripts are the ones that the lab staff really doesn't like me to let you use. And That's why we don't. Okay, you can run the Perl scripts from the command line, but we don't let you run Perl scripts from our web servers, whereas PHP scripts are a lot safer. So that's another reason that people like PHP scripts. You can sandbox them much more easily. Okay, does anyone remember if you want to run your own PHP script, how you do it? Where do you put it? Web home. Good. So I want you to do it. Okay, what I want you to do is just create one that prints the date. So if you're wondering what is the date command, it is date. So what I want you to do, and you print date. So what I want you to do is create a very simple PHP script that just prints date and watch what happens. So go to log in to one of the Hydra machines, go to www.home and do it yourself to show that this will help you see, first of all, what's going on, and it will also help with the homework. So this is the script I want you to create. Print date. And you can even boldface it if you want it to look nice. Make sure that works. Date expects at least one parameter. What's the parameter I want to give it? Let's see. Give me an example. Give me an example quickly. Come on. There we go. Print date. We'll pray. Here we go. Print date L. Okay, whoops, come on. There. So print date L, that should work. There we go. Whatever. Give that a try. So create that script and then try to invoke it from the browser. Let's make sure that works. Yep, it works. You got an error message? I didn't. I got Tuesday. Is this working for y'all, or are you not getting that far? Yes, no? Okay. Right, you can play with it if you got it done. If your neighbor's having trouble, look over your neighbor's shoulder. Pardon? You need to save it in a file web home. So in the directory web home, not the file, the directory web home. And then when Beth, and then when you execute it, so what happens is you'll type in, you'll start by typing in this part, which is web.eecs.utk.edu is our server, / then your username, whatever your EECS username is. And then, pardon? Tilde, whatever, tilde, okay. It's the path to your home, yes, so, right, okay, so what Adam's pointing out is I could have given the full path to my home directory. So what tilde BVZ does is it's giving the address to my, in fact, web home directory. So where it picks up is at web home. So I put my foo.php into a subdirectory called CGI bin. If you just put your foo directly into web home, you would then execute foo.php right after BVZ because it's in web home. Does that make sense? Web home is where web home is not a common space. It is your personal directory, but it's where the server looks for your executable scripts. When you type, yeah, so when you type, oh, I'll let it go. Have we pretty much gotten it, or are we having trouble? Is anyone having trouble? You got it? Okay, I'll assume you got it. Now, introduce an error. I'm going to introduce an error. So I'm going to misspell print as printle. Okay, and try running it now with an error. And what happens? Blank page. Does anyone know why a blank page comes up? Why it doesn't print an error message? That's not true, actually. Some people desperately want to know how the sausage is made. Brian?
He didn't specify to print errors.
So, okay, so PHP, our lab staff has set up PHP so it doesn't print an error message. Okay? Adam, I asked why, and Adam said because no one wants to know how we made the sausage. Actually, it's exactly the opposite. Hackers want to know how we made the sausage. So in fact, if we print error messages, it is a guide to the hackers as to what they are doing wrong as they experimentally try to break into your script. Okay, because what hackers do is they start typing in URLs. Well, initially they muck it up and the script crashes. So it prints out a very helpful syntax error message and the hacker goes, oh! And then they correct their syntax error and they do some more probing in your system. So printing out syntax errors is inviting hackers to attack your system. Therefore, the lab staff turns off this helpful feature. Now, this is problematic when you want to do development, okay? Because obviously, it also isn't very helpful that you're getting this error message. Fortunately, PHP allows you to operate at the command line too. So it has a command line interpreter called PHP. You can execute it, and it says, I have a parse error, and I can fix it. So what I recommend you do on your homework assignments is when your web forms don't work, which inevitably they won't the first time, that you first get things to work using the PHP command line interpreter. Now, this doesn't work perfectly because if you're getting form data from the user, that form data isn't available at the command line. It's only available when the script is run through the browser. However, you can hard code data and at least make sure it works with hard-coded data and at least get rid of your syntax errors and any obvious logic errors before you try running it through a browser. Capiche? We all good with that? Okay, good. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so I am going to quickly run through the interesting things about PHP. I'll let you read most of the language stuff because, again, it's not that hard. The important thing is that PHP looks like C. Okay, or PHP syntax looks like C syntax. So if in doubt about how what a syntactic construct looks like in PHP, assume that it uses C syntax. Okay, I'm going to point out the few things where it differs. Like all scripting languages, PHP doesn't require those annoying variable declarations. Like that annoying habit in Perl, all PHP variables start with a $sign. Forget the $sign, you get an error message. Why it needs to have a $sign in front of the variable name beats me. Okay, Scott, please enlighten, because this gets a lot of angry yelling at my laptop out of me.
It has something to do with variable variables.
It might. It could, but I mean, no one uses variable variables in PHP, so if that's the reason, it's brain dead. You'll notice that variable variables are in my notes, and I'll never talk about it in class. Because for those of you who, when you get to them, PHP has a form of pointers called variable variables, because you can actually store a variable name in a variable and then use it as a pointer, but it's not even worth talking about. At any rate, that might be the reason, but if that's the reason, 2 thumbs down, because I always am forgetting my $signs in front of my variable names. I find it so annoying. Okay, end of rant. Just remember, and unlike Perl, the $sign doesn't indicate the type of the variable. It just has to be there to annoy you. Okay, so all variable names start with a $sign. I'm sure there's a perfectly good explanation, but JavaScript doesn't require $signs in front of its variable names. It gets along very well in life. As does C, as does Java, as it does just about every language in the universe except for Perl and PHP. Okay, I guess I couldn't stop ranting. Okay, next thing. The PHP supports string interpolation. So it's just like Perl in that respect. And its syntax is just like Perl, so I shan't repeat it. But as in Perl, it uses string interpolation for double quotes and does not use them for single quotes. Okay. The concatenation operator is a period. So you can say things like print $A dot \n. Okay, if you're doing string comparison, you use the relational operators. Unlike Perl, remember Perl had its own special string comparison operators. PHP uses the normal ones. Okay, PHP has a variety of useful functions that I'll let you read about. I will highlight a few that are useful. Remember that PHP had split for splitting a line into fields. In PHP, the function is explode, and it takes a delimiter and a string, and it returns the string chopped into fields based on the delimiter. And just like in Perl, it's fairly limited because, for example, if the string is Brad blank 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 Vanderzanden blank, and I split on a blank, it will not just give me Brad Vander, I can't even spell my last name, that's horrible, and Zanden, but because there are multiple blanks in here, I'll get a few empty strings as well. So just like Perl has a way to specify a regular expression, you can use preg split. And what do you think preg might stand for? Use your imaginations. Close. Very good. Perl regular expressions. That's what it stands for. So preg stands for Perl regular expression, which means you use the Perl syntax. So you give a regular expression and your string. And now you get, it's just like Perl's split command. And I always forget the syntax for the regular expression. Let's see if it's in, I'm looking to see if it's in double quotes or not. It is. So you have to put the regular expression. So it's something like \s plus like that. So you put the regular expression inside of quotes, but you use Perl style syntax. Okay? So other things, Booleans, it has them unlike Perl. So you can use either capital true false or lowercase true false, or you can start it with a capital F and lowercase. It doesn't matter. It figures it out. The null is lowercase null. So if something doesn't have a value in Perl, it was undef. In PHP, it is null. Case, it's not case sensitive. Okay. If you want to cast something, you can use C-style casting. So if you have a string, $A equals 10, you want it to be converted to an int, you can say that. Or you can say $B equals set type. And tell it what you want it, which type you want it converted to. And the advantage of the second approach is that if the conversion fails, it gives you an error Boolean. It returns true or false for whether it succeeded. Whereas this one, you won't know whether it succeeded or not. It will return 0 if it failed, but you don't know if A was actually 0 or whether it was an unconvertible string. So the second form, the set type, allows you to determine whether the operation succeeded or failed. Okay. Again, just going through interesting stuff. Switch statements. Remember we said that scripting languages are all about being programmer friendly. How often have you wanted to do a switch on strings? I know I want to do it a lot. Well, you can't do it in C++ or C, but it's perfectly legit in PHP. So I can switch on, say, $name, and then I could have case Brad do something, case Sally. So it's really nice that you can use case statements on strings. Now, does anyone know why C and C++ don't allow you to switch on strings? Why you can, or why you can't switch on? You can switch on floating point numbers also if you want in PHP, but you can't switch on floating point numbers in C or C++. Why? does C and C++ limit switch statements to integers and chars? Yes, so Adam had the reason. So in C and C++, switch statements were introduced as an efficiency. They use what's called a jump table. So when you say in C and C++, if you say switch on A, and you say things like case 0, case 1, case 2, it doesn't convert it to a if then else, it converts it to an array. And it has a jump to a piece of code. Each entry has a pointer to the address of a piece of code. It's called a jump table. Okay, characters work because characters are between 0 and 128, actually 127. Floating point numbers obviously don't work because floating point numbers don't work in a jump table, and strings don't work in a jump table either. So that shows you the difference. C and C++ are all about efficiency, therefore the switch statement caters to machine efficiency. Scripting languages are all about programmer efficiency, and therefore the switch statement in scripting languages caters to programmer efficiency, which means we can use things like strings and floating point numbers in our switch statement. And they don't get converted to jump tables. They get converted to if-then-else statements. Okay? So functions, we're back to normal looking functions. They start with the function keyword, a name, parameters, which aren't declared, and our local variables that we introduce are local. If we want to use a global, we have to say it's a global. So if we want to use a global, we have to say global $ value, and that will say that value is a global rather than a local. So by default, variables in PHP functions are local, which mean that they die when the function exits. Okay. Again, you can read a lot of this stuff. If you want to import a file, a PHP file, you use the include. So this will include a PHP file, or you can say include once to prevent it from being loaded multiple times. So that means if some other file that you include, let's say I also had include foo.php, and foo.php included tax.php, the include once would ensure that it only got loaded once. Let's say I had also include goo.php, and they both included tax.php. This include once, actually that doesn't, it should work. It should stop it from loading multiple times. Okay, but it only works if it's included last. If you put an include foo.php down here, it would reload the tax.php file. So the include once should come last, not first. Okay, file I/O. PHP does not have an easy way to get to standard in. Does anyone know why it would not have an easy way to get to standard in? Typically would not have standard in. PHP was not designed to be a language executed at the command line. It was meant to be scripts executed from a browser, that were booted, where a browser called the script. And so the input is coming from a form, not from standard in. So it's actually not so easy to get at standard in using PHP. In fact, standard in is treated as a file. So you definitely need to be able to get at files, because on the back end, the server, you certainly want to be able to access things like databases or files so you can get at it. And in fact, there is a couple really nice commands. One of them is called $file get contents, and it gets the entire contents of a file and sucks it into a string. So it returns the entire $file underscore get underscore contents returns the entire file as a string. Very handy. I use it all the time in my PHP functions. You can also get it back as a set of lines. You'd have to look it up, but I know that file get contents has an option that will return it as an array of lines instead. I actually had it. If I say $lines equal $file name, then I get it back as an array of lines. So that's an array of lines. You're right. God, that's also why I hate PHP, because then it gets me putting dollar signs in the wrong place. But there I go again. Okay. Thank you. So just like you can dump a file into a string, you can dump a string into a file. So if you say file put contents, file name, and give it either a string or an array, it will dump the entire string into the file. So create it, open it, write it, and close it. Very handy. Okay, otherwise, the file I/O looks much like C I/O. And you can look it up, but I want to show you these three commands because I find them so incredibly useful. Okay, like number one, it opens the file, it reads it, and it does a close, all in one fell swoop. So that's why I'm showing you these things, because they're super helpful. If you need to get to standard in, you actually use fget s for file get string, and you say standard in, all caps. So if you need to get to standard in, it's fget s standard in. Okay, so those four things, the rest of it's just like in C. And here's another super nice thing. It has trim, ltrim, and rtrim. These functions strip leading / trailing white space. Perl had chomp, right? But what does chomp do? Slices off only the new line character. Trim removes all leading white space and trailing white space. So leading tabs, leading spaces, leading new lines, and all trailing white space. Ltrim does what you expect. It trims leading white space. Rtrim trims trailing white space on the right-hand side. And unlike chomp, they don't do in-place modification. So chomp does an in-place modification. Trim, Ltrim, and Rtrim return the copy with it trimmed. They don't do an in-place removal. Okay? So any questions about that? Okay. Moving on to arrays. PHP uses a single unified array. So arrays, both indexed and associative arrays. So associative arrays, get used to it. Associative arrays, dictionaries, hash tables, they all mean the same thing. So both indexed and associative arrays are handled using the array keyword. So if I want an array, I can say $A equals array. Or I could give it initial values, so I could give it a list. The list may be heterogeneous. So this would be an indexed array. This one right here is an indexed array, meaning it starts at 0. If I want an associative array, I give it pairs. So just like I would in Perl. So that tells it that it is an associative array rather than an indexed array. And then you get access to array elements. If it's an indexed array, you use a subscript, index numeric subscript. If it's an associative array, you just use the name of the keyword. And what's nice is you don't have to remember whether it's a curly brace or a square bracket. Remember in Perl, you use curly braces with dictionaries, you used square brackets with arrays. PHP gets rid of that distinction, which is nice. Okay, if you want to add elements to the back of an array, you can either use array push. And you can give as many arguments as you want. So this would push 10, 20, and 30 onto the end of the array. Or I could simply say $A equals, without the anything in the brackets, I could just say 10, and that will add it to the end of the array as well. Either way works. Okay, and you have so that's how you add things to the end of the array. If you want the number of elements in the array, you use count. So number of elements in array. If you want to get items off the front or add them to the front, you can say array shift, which will, we'll take a vote. So one of these adds elements to the array at the front, and one of them removes elements from the front. So just let's take a vote. How many of you think that shift adds a new element to the front of the array? And how many think that unshift add an element to the front of the array? Well, you would be right. Unshift is the one. I always get it confused, so I must be dyslexic on it. But array shift removes an element from the front. And array unshift adds an element. So there was a nice article once in Stack Overflow where someone seemed amazed at the fact where they profiled shift and unshift, and they also profiled push and pop. So there's array pop, which pops off the back. And they seemed surprised to find that push and pop were more efficient than shift and unshift. I hope that does not come as news to you. Okay? So unshift and shift are expensive operations because it has to move every other element in the array. Whereas pop and push are efficient because it's doing it at the end of the array. Okay, hopefully you learned this in 140. If not, now is a good time to remember or recall or learn that fact. It just blew me away that someone wrote that in Stack Overflow and asked why that was true. It's like, okay, guess, but that's also probably why we teach, in part, it's good we teach you C and C++ because you're close to the architecture there and you learn such things. Okay. What else? You can sort an array using a sort and k sort. So you give it an array and you give it a type, which is an optional parameter. And you can look up the sort types, but that is how you're able to tell it whether you want alphanumeric sorting or numeric sorting. It has several other types. What's important about this, a sort sorts the values of the array, k sort sorts the keys if it is an associative array. These don't allow you to provide a user-defined function. If you want to provide a user-defined function, use usort. Okay, can provide a user-defined comparison function. So a sort and k sort do not allow you to provide your own comparison function. They take keywords that specify what kind of sort you want. You also have AR sort and KR sort, which, what do you think they mean? Reverse. So it means sort it, but using reverse order. Okay. And two things at the end, loops. Loops are just like C, but just like Perl, there is a for each loop that allows you to iterate through the elements of a list, and which I encourage you to use. It is $array as $value. And if you want to iterate through an associative array, it is as $key arrow $value. You does not guarantee an order. So it won't appear in sorted order. The first one guarantees that it will do it in numeric index order. So if you have 0, 1, 2, 3, it will come back in that order. So those are the two loops for iterating through things. And finally, they have regular expressions. You've already seen preg split. There is preg match for Perl regular expression match, which takes a Perl pattern in double quotes and a string. So it will return true or false if it matched. If that's all you care about, you just leave it at that. If you want to capture content, you also provide an array. So if you have capturing parentheses, then you provide an array, and the array will contain the captured content. Array 0 will contain the entire substring that was matched. So the first one will be 1. The first captured content will be in entry 1. 2 will have the second captured content. 3 will have the third captured content. Okay, and if you want, that will only match the first. If you want to match every instance, you use preg match all. Same syntax. So Perl pattern, $string. Now presumably you do want all the matches. Now $array is really a multi-dimensional array. So what it is the 0th entry points to an array of all of your complete matches. 1 is a pointer to all of your matches with group 1. 2 is all of your matches with group 2. So it's a multi-dimensional array now. So if you were, for example, matching a date, and you had them in parentheses, essentially 1 would be your day, 2 would be your month. 1 would be your month, 2 would be your day, 3 would be your year. So that's how it would be. Okay, so preg match all. There's also a preg replace, which you can read about because I barely use preg replace ever. Typically, so Perl has substitution because it's all about manipulating data in files. PHP is not so much about changing things in a file. So you're using preg match and preg match all to type check form data. But it's rare that you actually have to use preg replace to do any kind of replacement of things, or at least I don't use it very often. Okay. One final thing, just a useful thing. Perl allowed you to interpolate an array. So if $A is an array, you could put you could say print at A, and it would print the contents of the array. That won't work in PHP. It will print out array. That's really helpful. So there's a command called printr. I don't know why it's called printr, but that will print the contents of an array in a nice readable form for you. So instead of having to iterate through it. So printr prints the contents of an array. That's good for debugging. It doesn't really help you for actually working in a browser, but it's very helpful when you're debugging. Okay, so Thursday we're going to start into how you create HTML forms. So it's kind of a diversion from PHP, more a discussion of HTML. and then we kind of get back into PHP on Tuesday. So until then, have fun. Remember, there is a assignment due today at, what is it, 5 or midnight? I think it's 5. So there's an assignment due at 5. If you have questions about it, feel free to come